If you had told me 5 years ago that a single evening in Amsterdam would alter the course of my life and my company, I would have laughed. Not out of arrogance, but out of certainty. I believed I had seen it all. Built from the ground up, survived 2 recessions, rebuilt the agency after a devastating acquisition attempt, and still showed up every morning with the kind of quiet pride only founders know. My name is David van der Linden. I'm the founder and CEO of Lumen & Co., a boutique branding agency born out of post-crisis grit and a refusal to settle. I've led campaigns that turned obscure startups into household names, navigated partnerships that could have torn us apart, and mentored more young strategists than I can count. Some stayed, some left, a few even betrayed me, but none of them ever changed me, until her. Then Sophie walked in. It was at a Hoxton-hosted networking event, one of those creative mixers where half the room chases Instagram moments and the other half just tries to look busy. I'd gone out of duty, the agency's face among dozens. She entered with none of that manufactured flair. Her stride was calm. Her gaze, though, sharp, curious, felt like it measured the room. And when her eyes landed on mine, it wasn't lust or pretense. It was assessment. She wore a simple navy sheath dress, nothing ostentatious. Yet somehow she owned the space without demanding it. I found myself studying her the way I used to dissect a brand's identity, searching for what made her different. What made her stand out wasn't beauty, it was conviction. She listened to each speaker as if their words were rare gems, and when she finally spoke, it was deliberate, concise, illuminating. We were introduced by a mutual acquaintance, but it felt like destiny. Within minutes, we were deep in conversation. Chekhov's subtext, the ethics of AI and storytelling, the absurdity of stock photo cliches. She challenged me on strategy, not out of rebellion, but out of genuine hunger for clarity. I was used to deference. She gave me none, and I was captivated. 15 minutes later, she asked the question that still echoes in my mind. Have you ever considered what happens when you let someone else lead for just one project? I laughed. Only when I'm tired. She smiled, unafraid. Then you must be very tired. We parted that night with her card in my pocket. Hers, not mine. No LinkedIn request, no promise of coffee, just a card and a question that lodged itself in my thoughts. 3 days later, I emailed her. I don't usually do this, but I can't stop thinking about your question. Lunch? She said yes. Our lunch slipped into late afternoon coffees and soon into evenings spent wandering Amsterdam's canals. I discovered her background, a boutique Berlin firm quick to innovate but slow to empower. I showed her our agency's war room, once empty shelves now lined with awards. She asked why I hadn't brought her sooner. I told her I'd waited for the right moment. By the end of the month, I offered Sophie a junior strategist role, not because she was my girlfriend, though that developed organically, but because she possessed that rare spark, intellect tempered by empathy. She made me question entrenched ideas. She invigorated every discussion. And in business, as in life, you follow that spark at your own risk or reward. Risk or reward. That balance would define everything that followed. I never set out to play favorites. When I tapped Sophie to co-lead our first major relaunch, it wasn't because she was my project girlfriend. It was because she saw patterns others missed. I still remember the day I walked into the boardroom and said, I'd like Sophie to drive this. A hush fell. Senior partners exchanged glances. Maya, who had stewarded our last 2 relaunches, looked surprised. I smiled and added, her insights on consumer motivation will be invaluable. That was the moment I realized true leadership sometimes means bending the rules. Not for personal gain, but for strategic vision. I watched Sophie's eyes light up, a spark of possibility I hadn't seen in months. In the weeks that followed, I quietly championed her every step. I handed her client emails, copying myself only to stay in the loop. I introduced her by name, always Sophie, when she joined steering calls with senior executives. Let me bring Sophie in here, I'd say, and their ears would perk at the hint of new perspective. I made sure the board heard her voice firsthand. Sophie, would you share your analysis? I'd prompt, positioning her not as an associate, but as the co-pilot. I arranged for her to present at our annual strategy offsite. When she hesitated, nervous about stage fright, I told her, you belong on that stage. In front of 50 colleagues, she delivered a 5-minute talk on brand empathy that had even the most cynical veteran leaning forward. Applause rippled through the room as she stepped down, cheeks flushed, eyes alight with pride. I caught Maya's gaze too, half surprise, half something unreadable. Beyond the optics, I worked behind the scenes to shield her from politics. Whenever whispers arose, "Is this nepotism?" I confronted them directly, citing her performance metrics: engagement uptick, campaign ROI, glowing client feedback. I had spreadsheets on hand, evidence that her rise was data-driven, not dress-driven. My message was clear. This is what talent looks like, regardless of connections. I also took care to protect her from burnout. Long after the rest of us left the office, I'd see her poring over slide decks, red eyes betraying fatigue. I'd send a Slack ping, "Let's grab a coffee at 7:30. She'd crack a wry smile and join me, and I'd insist she take the rest of the night off. One evening, I even showed up at her apartment, unannounced, with emergency takeout and 2 smoothies, saying, "No work tonight." Her grateful laugh reminded me why I'd done it in the first place. Not out of obligation, but because I genuinely cared. Mentorship, I learned, is far more than meetings and PowerPoints. It's about creating space for someone to grow, giving them the mic, defending their turf, and quietly shouldering their burdens. When clients gushed about her fresh perspective, I listened with satisfaction because every compliment was a testament to her hard work and my faith in her. And yet, somewhere between my promotion pushes and her milestones, a line blurred. I found myself defending her not just as a colleague, but as an extension of my own legacy. When she hesitated to challenge a partner's outdated strategy, I'd nudge her gently. "Speak up. Your vision is valid." When she fretted over small errors, I'd reassure her, "Mistakes happen. What matters is your response." I was cultivating more than a rising star. I was nurturing a successor. All the while, Maya watched. Once I overheard Maya tell a junior strategist, "David favors Sophie." It was said with envy, but also with a tinge of relief, as if Maya longed for someone else to carry the load she'd carried for years. I believed I was balancing old and new, honoring Maya's contributions while making room for Sophie's ascent. In private moments, though, a voice inside me whispered warnings. I caught myself thinking, am I propelling her forward because I see her as my heir, or because I'm afraid of losing her? My affection for Sophie blurred with my ambition for the agency. In my zeal to uplift her, did I unwittingly elevate her above her peers? Did I grant her more credit than she'd earned? These doubts surfaced one evening when the three of us, Maya, Sophie, and I, dined at a quiet canal-side bistro. Over salad and white wine, Maya spoke of her plans to take a sabbatical, of burnout and creative fatigue. Sophie reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "You've built so much, Maya. We can't wait to pick up where you left off." Maya's forced smile lingered a heartbeat too long, then she set her fork down. "I'm not sure if it's we. This feels different than before." The comment stung. Sophie's eyes flicked to mine, searching for reassurance. I swallowed my guilt and said, "This is change. Sometimes it's messy, but I believe in both of you." It felt hollow, even as I uttered it. As I walked Sophie back to her apartment that night, I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're doing incredible work," I told her. "I'm proud of you." She leaned into my hand, then looked up at me with that steady gaze. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you." And there it was, the unspoken pact. She needed my support. I needed her spark. Together, we illuminated paths neither of us could walk alone. But as I closed the door behind me and headed home, I couldn't shake the lingering question. When you elevate someone so fully, do you prepare them to stand beside you or to surpass you? Because in the silence after her footsteps faded, I realized that in lifting Sophie up, I was building a bridge. And not all bridges lead back. It started small. The first time Sophie corrected me in a meeting, it was subtle. We were on a call with a high-profile client, the kind of account that paid for half our Q3 runway, and I made a reference to their previous rebranding initiative. Sophie gently interjected, "Actually, I think what they're trying to do now is move away from legacy positioning entirely." She said it with that charming mix of deference and certainty, the way she always did when she was about to win the room. The client nodded slowly. "Yes, exactly that." I let it slide, even smiled, because she was right. But there was a flicker of something else in me that day. A pang, a flickering awareness that her voice now carried a weight I hadn't entirely given her. Over the months that followed, the dynamic shifted. Sophie began leading more meetings. I found myself chiming in where she'd once sat silently. She took charge of our most ambitious campaign pitch, one I had originally outlined. Her presentation was bold, elegant, undeniably hers. I watched from the side of the room, hands clasped like a guest at my own wedding. Still, I told myself this was the plan. You wanted her to grow. You prepared her for this. But leadership is a strange thing. You don't notice when you start giving pieces of it away until you realize there's nothing left to hold on to. One morning, I walked into the office and found Sophie already in the glass-walled conference room, laughing with the CFO and two board members. She was in my seat. Not physically. She always sat off to the right, but symbolically, undeniably, she was commanding the room. When I entered, their laughter softened. "David," the CFO greeted me with a nod. "Sophie was just updating us on the Carver brief. You should have seen the prototype. Brilliant work." I blinked. The Carver brief was supposed to be my domain. Later that day, I asked her gently, "Why didn't you loop me in?" She looked genuinely puzzled. "I thought you were swamped with the pitch for Horizon. I didn't want to bother you. Besides, I knew what you'd say. Go bold. Don't be afraid to surprise them." She smiled, like it was still the two of us in that early intimacy. But I felt something loosen inside me. We'd crossed a line, and I hadn't even noticed. The board started seeking her out, not me. Her. First for feedback, then for strategy, then for vision. At our annual retreat, one of the partners leaned toward me during dinner and said, half-jokingly, "If you ever decide to retire early, at least we know who will replace you." I laughed. He didn't. And Sophie, she smiled when she heard. Not sheepishly, not with surprise, just a quiet, poised smile, like she already knew. I began to wonder if I had truly seen her, or only the version of her I wanted to see. Had I mistaken ambition for spark? Had I projected legacy onto someone simply because I loved her and hoped she might carry something of me forward? Because in the end, she didn't carry me. She eclipsed me. Our relationship, romantic, professional, whatever you'd call the strange hybrid we built, crumbled not in one dramatic explosion, but in the slow erosion of mutual benefit. We stopped staying late together. The coffee runs became calendar invites. When she spoke in meetings, she didn't glance at me for support anymore. And when I finally asked her, over a quiet dinner far from the office, what we were becoming, she didn't hesitate. "I don't think we work anymore," she said. "Not as we are now. We've outgrown the shape of us." She said it kindly, like she was sparing me. But I knew. I knew it wasn't we who had changed. It was her. And I was no longer part of the trajectory she saw for herself. In that moment, I felt something break loose in me, a blend of grief and pride, fury and awe. I had built her wings, and she had flown without looking back. Was I proud of her? Yes. Did I love her still? God, yes. Did I regret choosing her? I don't know. Maybe I chose her because I thought she'd follow my path. Maybe I was wrong because she carved her own. Maybe that's what great leaders do. Or maybe I just got played. And as I sit now in my office, no longer the center, no longer the future, I wonder what I truly created in Sophie. A successor, a mistake, or a mirror. Because she didn't take everything from me. I gave it, willingly. And maybe that's the tragedy, or maybe, just maybe, it's the legacy. I don't know if I built a leader or the woman who will dismantle everything I ever stood for. Either way, I chose her. And that choice changed everything.